We're also joined by Timothy Taylor. Evidence in your case was handled by Annie Duquesne. Can you talk about what happened to you, Timothy?
Okay, first I was arrested in 2009, and what ended up happening was there's a chain of custody. They support from the police station to the lab. There's a chain of custody that's been broken, and no one knows who authorized the evidence that the suspected evidence drugs that they had. Who sent them to different labs throughout the state when they could have done it all in that one place? So now we run into burdens of chain of custody, and apparently now the weights of what they had from the time from the transportation from the police department to the lab, it became more than what it started out to be. So we don't even know what's going on with that. It's been tampered with from the beginning. They withheld, there was two drug certs. One was definitely not mine. The other one was. And I've been forced basically to, under duress, to plead out. Discovery has been withheld from me from 5 years. The original drug certs was withheld. They was never entered into the Department of Justice system. They was never in Martha Coakley's investigation. And they came up 5 years later when they was trying to, when I appealed for a new trial. I was told that Annie Duquesne was not the leading chemist on my drug certs, and they can prove it by having the original drug search that they never submitted in the first place. So what was in front of the judge was somebody else's drug certs that I've already pleaded guilty to, because I had to choose the lesser of two evils of the time that I was told that I would get a 16 to 30 on the drug search that they had.
Can you talk, Timothy, about how this drug conviction has affected your life, from where you live to getting a job?
I was living in a home. I was volunteer working at a store. My family ties, my relationship, it affected my my program that I had for myself that I had made up with City Councilor Charles Turner. It was called the TEACH program. It was the training, education, the employment, the career, and housing. Those things definitely affected my status from the time for me being incarcerated.
Your public housing application is on hold until you appeal your conviction. You were attempting to adopt your son while you were incarcerated, but then another family got to adopt him?
Yes. Yes, it created a big family issue. It took me away from my family. I've lost numerous family members. I was not allowed to go to their funerals while I was incarcerated. My blood brother and my uncles and, you know, my stepfather. The punishment was greater than anything you can ever think of. My education, since it was a drug crime, it's going to stop my my Pell Grants, my federal, my FAFA. I'm trying to get back in college. It affected that definitely. Employment, I was trying to, I can't get a decent job paying good money to, you know, survive. As far as my career, I've been trying to go back to college. It all revolves around the same issues. And the housing is just, you know, they didn't want to hear nothing from me. Basically, I was to stay homeless for I guess for a felony, 10 years. Walk the streets. I mean, just try to survive.
Assistant Attorney General Ann Kaczmarek said during Duquesne's hearing that there was no evidence that Duquesne was motivated to get defendants off the streets. But I want to turn to this email exchange Duquesne had with Assistant U.S. Attorney John Wortman from June 10th, 2009. Wortman wrote, quote, "Annie, thanks. Sorry to be so bothersome lately, but the summer approaches and we need to take some of these guys off." Duquesne replies, quote, "No problem. I have the same attitude. Get them off the streets." Matt Siegel, can you talk about the significance of this?
Well, it's very significant, and it's emblematic of the larger issue, which is that not only was there misconduct by Duquesne, but there was a failure at every step along the way to do the right thing by these people until litigation forced the hands of the folks involved. And we're seeing that. You mentioned the other scandal in Massachusetts, the Sonia Farrick scandal. And there, too, there are now allegations not only of misconduct by the Chemist, but misconduct by prosecutors, state prosecutors. And so we're deeply concerned that the reaction of public officials in Massachusetts, some of whom acknowledge that drug use is a public health issue, has been to avoid doing justice and to keep hurting people. And that's just, it's just so terrible, because what you just heard from Timothy is that the way we deal with the drug problem in America is not just to punish people for what is a public health issue, but to keep punishing them for years, long after they finish serving a sentence of incarceration. It's just to keep punishing them. And we really need to take a look at what that approach is doing to the lives of people in Massachusetts and across the country.
I mean, what about deportations? Do you know of these cases? How many people were deported after being imprisoned on false evidence?
This is a real problem. We're not sure of the exact number because particularly given what we're hearing from the federal government these days, we don't have a trustworthy means of providing to the federal government a list of the people who were wrongfully convicted so that the federal government can check to see who was deported, because we can't, in good conscience, supply such a list to the federal government. So this is something that we were talking about in court with the judge and with prosecutors as recently as last week. We're deeply concerned about the problem of people who've been deported, and we're going to do the best we can to try to solve it.
Mallory Honora, what are you doing now with this dismissal of these tens of thousands of convictions? How do people find out? I mean, some of them have served years in jail and are now out.
Right. I know one particular person who I've been communicating with since we've been doing the organizing, who is calling today just waiting and holding his breath to know whether or not his case has been dismissed, and he is waiting to feel what he describes as finally free. I agree with Matt that people do continue to be punished even when they get out, and that stigma that's attached to people with convictions is really preventing them from being a whole member of the community like they deserve to be. We organized hundreds and hundreds of people to call the district attorney's office, not just with the message of dismiss the cases, but with the message of stop prosecuting people for drugs. This is hurting our communities. It's not contributing to public safety, and we need something else besides a criminal punishment response to drugs.
Finally,
we're going to keep organizing.
I want to ask
because we.
Go ahead.
Sorry. We just need to keep organizing because the Amherst scandal that we're talking about, there's thousands more people for whom there's absolutely no plan right now to get them justice. Some of those people might still be inside. So we're going to continue to keep the community pressure up to dismiss all of these cases, release people who are still in jail, and then hopefully transform the way that we're responding to drugs in Massachusetts.
And finally, Matt Siegel, you have these two lab chemists in Amherst and in Boston. But who else had to collaborate to make this happen? I mean, in the case of Annie Duquesne, police and others knew that they could go to her. I mean, she was handling so many cases. She wasn't even testing this. But this was the fastest way to get evidence in a case. Who else? What is the chain of command here of those who are responsible?
Well, Annie Dukin was a worker at for the State Department of Public Health, and there was clearly a failure of supervision. There was a failure of protocol to even tell the public once it was known that she was committing misconduct. And as you say, there were some rather interesting correspondence between Annie Dukin and other people when she was saying things like, let's get people off the streets. That doesn't sound like someone who was doing science. It sounds like someone who was trying to harm people. But, I think that I don't want to get too far down the road of accusing anybody. We certainly haven't done that in this case, accused anybody besides Annie Dukin of wrongdoing. What we're saying, though, is that as long as the justice system tries to put people in prison for these types of offenses and to do it on the cheap, these kinds of scandals are going to happen. They're going to be inevitable. And so the response from the ACLU, from public defenders, from advocates like Mallory, and from people standing up for their rights like Timothy, that needs to be just as powerful and just as strong.
I want to thank you all for being with us. Matthew Siegel, ACLU of Massachusetts, Mallory Hanura, Families for Justice as Healing, and Timothy Taylor, who had evidence in his drug case handled by Annie Dukin. He was arrested in 2009, served 5 years in prison. This is Democracy Now! When we come back, what happened on the streets of Berkeley this weekend between white nationalists and anti-fascist protesters? Stay with us.